Right. Okay. So, hey, my name is Dick Burroughs, Rich Burroughs the son. I am the curator for a art exhibition called Cover Lover Remix. Cover Lover Remix is a group show where artists remix or reinterpret, if you will, their favorite and iconic album covers. I am here talking to Kristin McIver, who is an artist that's in the exhibition. Hello there, Kristin.
Hello, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yes, yes. And just to give a little context to who you are, because I know that, you are an artist, you are Brooklyn based now, you are from Melbourne, Australia. A lot of Aussies in Brooklyn, by the way.
Quite a few.
And I know that you do work primarily in neon.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for the intro. I moved over here 8 years ago. I'd sort of had a couple of shows here and been working here for a while, having various group shows and so on. And then actually February 2021, I had my first solo exhibition in New York, which was very exciting at Jane Lombard Gallery. It was scheduled for April 2020, but obviously the pandemic changed those plans. So ended up being February this year, and it was a mixed media exhibition. So neon has always been a primary medium of mine, but really it's just a medium that I use to visualize language and data and so on. So I would actually call my medium the ideas, because I'll execute those ideas in different mediums such as video, sculpture. Sometimes I'm doing paintings. And then the neon has sort of been a constant throughout because I really like the way that it brings this sort of elevation to the concept behind the words that I choose to represent. And it sort of creates this surreal elevation, and we're used to seeing it in the context of signage and storefronts and retail and so on, but it's got this sort of seductive quality because of that. We see it in suburban shopping strips, we see it as we walk down the street, but it's got this it's also used in the sex industry obviously and so on, but it's got this seductive quality about it that transcends what the words are saying, and I quite like that, the way that it has that ability to move beyond, take the words beyond their original meaning and transform them into something else.
Right. It definitely empowers the words.
Yes.
So like if you see the word sale,
yeah,
or you see the word sex,
yeah,
both of those things in neon, if they were just written in just a flat paint, they wouldn't have, the same power of what neon brings to them.
I've got this series called Data Poems where I use data and algorithms to create artificially generated poetry. So it's sort of taking these words another step beyond their original form and meaning, and then the data will create a new poem, which is actually written completely by a computer algorithm.
All right.
Yeah, and then I extract those words and then place them in neon and placed in a gallery space or in a different context, they create another form of poetry and another form of meaning. Looking at words as form. So as you said, like the word sale, if you see that in paint or if you see it in neon or if you see it on a sign, it has a certain, obviously meaning and form, but taking that out of its context and placing it in a completely different context, it takes another meaning, and you see it more as an object rather than the word and the meaning behind it. I had some work displayed in Times Square last year, and it was actually a series of my neon works that were photographed and placed in the context of Times Square. So that was quite interesting. Some of those neons had been exhibited in natural environments and various different environments, but placed back into an area full of neon and full of signs.
Square
and so
is
on,
neon,
trying to compete with your attention.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes, that's exactly. It's the home of neon. That and Vegas, basically. But they were very still compared to all the movement and lights going on. These were very still and serene, and they also brought in natural elements and so on. And they were displayed in Times Square on a big screen. And it was actually up during the week of the Black Lives Matter protest, one of those early weeks, just after all the rioting and so on, and all the shops were boarded up and so on. So it was really interesting to see these sort of words of hope and you know, words such as this beautiful day and phrases that have been derived from a time pre-pandemic and then placed within this context of a Times Square that was completely unrecognizable. You know, I've never seen the city like that. And there was, I have photos of the work when it was there, and there was riot police all underneath. There was boarded up shop fronts. You still had this strange advertisement going on, but it was completely out of context. Times Square is such an icon in itself, but to see it in this unusual context where the streets were completely empty except for crowds of uniformed riot police, boarded up shop fronts, and it really was just so strange. And as you said, it'll probably never look like that again.
Right.
There was the protesters, because the protests would often end up in Times Square, or they would start there.
Right.
And so there was this like building anticipation. I actually went there to photograph the work because it was only displayed at 7 p.m. and curfew was kicking in at 8 p.m. So that's when things, so it was a crazy time to be in there. So if you recall, that was that was one of the most surreal weeks of 2020 in New York City. There was a lot going on. It was the first time that we'd all emerged from quarantine, and because there was something that we, you know, was very important to draw us all together.
To draw us out.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, everyone's like, well, fuck it, this is more important.
Right.
we need to protest what's going on here. But there was so much tension in there. I think the night before, the rioters had raided into Macy's and so on. So there was this like the riot police and the protest groups there was just nothing had happened yet, but there was just this electric energy in the air of anticipation and what's going to happen next. And
I can feel it coming in the air. Hold on. Hey, little Phil Collins for you.
Yeah, little Phil.
What does your practice and your process typically, like, what does it look like?
It's probably different to a lot of what you might expect of an artist studio. Like, you know, often at my studio will be full of like drawings and sketches, and my walls are covered. So it's really about the ideas as the process. And then often I'm on a computer screen if I'm doing a video piece. Often I'm outside, you know, recording video or sound and so on. Like, as humans, we always think that we're part of this system that we live in, the capitalist system. We're buying products, but in this digital age, we have essentially become the product ourselves with our data footprints. And so as we use social media and browse the web and search on Google, everything we do is recorded and stored in databases and traded between for advertising and so on. So essentially, as we consume products, we are also becoming the product ourselves, because our data has now has such value.
Yes.
There's so much
commercialized. It's
commercialized, exactly. So there's huge data banks around the world storing our information, and that information has actually surpassed the value of oil. So it's actually become a new economy, and we are actually the product. We don't realize that we're actually the product. So a lot of the work that I do is looking at various forms of data that we might generate. For example, surreptitiously, when we use Facebook and you tag a photo, it creates this face recognition data behind the visual image that we see. And this data is worth a lot of money because, the Facebook owns the largest database of face recognition data, for example. The biggest data bank in the world. So they've sold that to the FBI, and then, the airports have access to it and everything. So while you're browsing the internet, you don't realize that you're actually creating a footprint for yourself that is actually way beyond Facebook or where it originated. So what I do is I take, I borrow that data. So I did a series of data portraits that I call them. So I asked my subjects to provide their face recognition data, and then I would revisualize that into a visual painted medium, or using different mediums, such as even I've done video works with face recognition data. So where I'll just literally assign the data to video clips, and then the data will determine the order of the clip. So again, it creates this algorithmically sequenced film. Or I've done the same with sound works and poetry and paintings. So I sort of define the parameters, and then the data will determine what the painting looks like, for example.
That sounds very post-Trumpian Matrix.
Yeah, it's pretty matrix.
In that process, in that practice, like what role does music play in your creative process?
I mean, I look at music is constructed in a similar way to film, but also if you look at its components, it's really just, it's a time-based medium with a timeline, and that's where I like to sort of manipulate. So if I have a different set of musical notes, I can manipulate those with data and algorithms, and then along a timeline that will create an artificially generated composition. So if you look at your timeline on social media, that's completely artificially generated as well, or algorithmically generated. So we're used to seeing things in a linear format now as we browse through our stories and so on. But the pieces of information that we're looking at are completely generated for us based on our preferences and so on. So it's a different way than we're used to seeing film and television, for example, because we're looking at a timeline that has been, composed by a filmmaker, a director, or a musician, or a composer.
Right.
Whereas when we look at social media, this timeline is actually generated by a computer.
It's definitely a manipulated engagement. What types of music do you like to listen to when you are in the Kristin mind of making something magical?
Yeah. Well, at the moment, I mean, that changes, as I said, depending on the mood, but I love, at the moment, Afrobeat and reggae is always something that gets me relaxed and in the zone.
Yes, good, very good.
Yeah, always good, and something soulful. But often music, I find, without lyrics, I think it's when I'm in that creative zone.
Yes.
So I can really sort of focus on the transformative aspect of the musical notes and the emotion that's created through the music. This
is Cover Level Remix, and it's a exhibition that is rooted in the love and the appreciation, and a bit of the nostalgia, and just the general appreciation for album cover art.
Yeah.
And I know that part of this is exhibition is kind of interrelated to the bounce back of the vinyl industry, and vinyl has made like a really huge bounce back. It's as popular as ever. I interviewed DJ Amir over in Berlin several months ago during the pandemic, and he was saying he had 2 or 3 projects that are already in the can, but because everyone seemed to make a bit of music while they were locked down, that it's not enough processing record plants to press up the music. They literally are on a waiting list, like they're trying to get a kidney, right? Yeah. They're on a waiting list to actually press their music up. You're a fan of album covers. Yeah. So what album cover that you choose to do for Cover Level Remix?
I chose to resample Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures, because I really feel that's one of the most iconic album covers of all time. It's instantly recognizable just from the artwork alone.
Yes.
And also I guess conceptually I like it because it's again a data visualization. If you're not familiar with the squiggly, it's a series of squiggly lines, which are actually radio frequencies of a pulsar, which is basically a dying star, or a star that has and it's actually the sort of the beginnings of the forming of the black hole. So it's actually a really interesting phenomenon. They were only discovered in 1967, which is when Joy Division obviously was, long before they were emerging as well. But yeah, basically it's a visual representation of the light that a pulsar emits. Nice. If you think of a pulsar, it's basically like a lighthouse. It's sort of this spinning form of matter. I think it's 2 billion times more dense than the Earth. So it has a gravitational pull and electromagnetic field and so on, and that's what creates this it's spinning and this light that emits. So the flashes that you see, that, not you see, but through a very strong telescope.
Right. Through a Hubble.
Exactly.
A Hubble.
From this, spinning star, which has started out like twice the size as our sun and then collapsed because it ran out of fuel, essentially.
Right.
And then,
the American economy.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean. I kind of like it because it does sort of feel a little bit like the world we're going through right now. Like everything as we knew it has sort of collapsed and is in the process of turning into something else, but we don't know what yet.
Exactly. And I like that because Joy Division is like you know how they say like, some artists are like your favorite rapper's favorite rapper.
Yeah. Well,
Joy Division is like your favorite punk band's favorite punk band.
Exactly.
Right. So I always applaud people when they take on really big album covers. Richie Sway Iwanski, he did the Purple Rain cover.
Oh wow!
And I was like, man, that's a big cover. Like that's a big. And he was like, why not take, the challenge is that's what it's there for. So this concludes my convo with Kristin McIver. Not MacGyver. She's not the 80s TV star who can use duct tape and a pair of scissors and get out of anything. That is not what that is.
Don't call me if you get locked out of your house. Don't
do that. Don't do that. She's the amazing Aussie artist that's now Brooklyn based, who is doing awesome things in New York City. I look forward to seeing all the things that you're doing even before we get to Cover Lover Remix. And I really appreciate you being in the show, and I appreciate you having a conversation with me today.
Thank you so much, Rich. I'm really looking forward to developing the work for the show, and I really can't wait to see what all the other artists are going to produce as well. It's a very cool exhibition.
Yes, and it's going to have
music and art.
It's going to be a whole thing. But I appreciate you. Maybe I'll see you this weekend out on the block.
Yep, for sure.
Yes.
Look forward to it. See you.
Yes. Okay. Bye.